He is an international leader in planetary health, an internist, an environmental and occupational medicine specialist, and an accomplished author. His books include Planetary Health, Protecting Nature, Protect Ourselves, and Making Healthy Places a Built Environment for Health, Well-Being, and Sustainability. His research interests include public health and the built environment, climate change and nature contact, and he loves cycling, kayaking, and hiking. Dr. Brupkin, or Howie, as he's referred to by those who know him, is no stranger to Atlanta. Though Howie currently resides in Seattle, Washington, he called Atlanta home starting in 1990 through 2010. While in Atlanta, he served in roles as the professor and chair of the Environmental and Occupational Health the chair of Environmental and Occupational Health at Emory, and later as the director of the National Center for Environmental Health at the CDC. While he was at Emory, I had the great opportunity to get to know Howie as we worked together to dispel misinformation and to educate the public on air quality issues when he served on the board for a nonprofit I worked for, the Clean Air Campaign. I've always admired Howie for his keen intellect, his passion for issues of shared concern, and his willingness to be bold and courageous when others were less inclined to do so. When we decided on the theme of this year's conference, I immediately thought of Howie. Of his new role at the Trust for Public Land, Howie has said that he believes the Trust for Public Land's path forward can be mapped by linking land with health, equity, and climate action, harnessing the power of land for people through community-centered and evidence-driven approaches. This path forward is an appropriate foundation for today's program and a great starting point as we dive into the healing power of parks. Howie's talk is entitled Parks, the Public Health Superpower Hiding in Plain Sight. Please join me in welcoming Howie Frumkin back to Atlanta.
Thank you, Michael. That was an absolutely wonderful introduction. It is so nice to be back in a city that I love, at the meeting of an organization I love, on the theme, the healing power of parks that I love. It's just fantastic. Really nice to be here. Thank you very much for arranging the rain last night. That makes me feel right at home as a Seattleite. I was reflecting with Michael that it was 15 years ago this week that I last spoke at a Park Pride conference, at the 7th annual Park Pride conference, and it's especially nice to be invited back. You're getting a whole new meaning to recycling. So. Well, I am delighted to talk about the public health superpower that resides in parks. What you'll hear me do in the next few minutes is pursue two particular themes. One is that we have a large, robust, and growing body of evidence that documents the healing power of parks and that guides us in getting it right and harvesting that healing power optimally. And the second is that the healing power of parks, although it's very important in healing the biomedical problems that I learned about in medical school, it's actually much broader than that, hence the term superpower. The healing power of parks operates through a number of indirect pathways, all of which improve health and well-being for people. So I'm going to go through that. I'm going to name a number of problems that I think parks can help us with. And I'm going to talk about the ways in which parks can help us solve those problems. Before I do that, just a word on the Trust for Public Land, where I work now. This is an organization that's 50 years old. It creates parks and protects land for people now and in perpetuity. It's an organization whose themes, as Michael mentioned, are health, equity, climate action, and community. It's a national organization. I work out of the Seattle office, but there is a large office here in Atlanta led by the one and only George Duesenberg. This is an incredible team that's working every day to bring parks and green schoolyards, also the Taruki River thing, to people of this region. Can I just ask the staffers and the board members of the TPL office here to raise their hands now and be recognized. So let's begin with the main topic at hand for today. This is the first of several problems that I'll talk about. So one of the ways to measure health is through life expectancy. This is a picture of the life expectancies of the longest lived dozen or so countries in the world. You'll see Singapore, you'll see Israel, you'll see Switzerland. I know what you're looking for, and it's not there. There's the next 12 countries where you'll see Australia, you'll see Sweden, France, and Italy. Still not there. Here's the next 12 countries: Austria, Cayman Islands, and so on. Still not there. And here we are, number 48 worldwide. If life expectancy were an Olympic sport, we would not even be close to medaling. Now, you may think, well, that's because we don't spend enough on health care. So this is a picture of the proportion of the GDP that goes to health care. It's hard to read those country names along the left. But I think you can guess which the top country is. We spend about a third, 40% more per capita on health care than the next highest spending countries. But we still have number 48 life expectancy, so something is going very wrong. What have we done for it? Well, here's the list of meeting clauses. This is from 2021, so you'll see the third clause there, which is COVID, having recently joined the list. But it didn't displace the top two long-standing clauses: heart disease and cancer. And then you'll see a number of other clauses below that. Spoiler alert, I'm going to show you evidence in the next few minutes that parks help reduce mortality and suffering from almost all of the clauses on this list. Now, things aren't trending in a good direction, so the role of parks is especially timely and critical. This is a picture of rising what they call deaths of despair. These are deaths from liver disease, drug overdose, and suicide. And it's because of these rising death rates from these diseases that our country's inexorable march toward lower and lower mortality rates has been arrested in the past few years. And mortality is now actually rising. You can see the increasing mortality rates for various demographic groups shown in this slide. This is for adults. Even more tragically, this is a picture of mortality rates for kids. There's a lot to look at in this slide. You might just want to focus on the slide on the right. And what you'll see is that kids' mortality from a number of causes, injuries, poisonings, drug overdoses, was declining in this country up until just a few years ago when it started rising. So we've got excessively high mortality rates. They're moving in the wrong direction. It's not because we're not spending enough on health care. Let's look at a couple of the key diseases that are helping to contribute to the challenge we face. This is a complicated map. It's a bi-colored map showing two kinds of data. So it shows rates for obesity and for diabetes, one in blue and one in red. And if a place is purple, then it's got high rates of both obesity and diabetes. This is the 2004 profile of the country. This is 2009. This is 2014. This is 2019. So there's an increasing march toward higher rates of these diseases. We know a lot about what contributes to these diseases: sedentary lifestyles, unhealthy diets, and other factors. But parks can help. Parks are part of the solution. I'm going to tell you about 3 pathways. This isn't the full list of pathways through which parks help with these health problems. Parks quiet down noise levels in cities. Parks improve air quality. But let me just focus on these 3 pathways: nature contact, physical activity, and social interactions. First, nature contact. Oops. So the way I like to think about nature contact and its health benefits is embodied in the picture here of a label of Von Moore's electromagnetic bathing fluid. This is medicine that my mother raised me on after the Civil War. If you look at the label carefully, you'll see that it was good for neuralgia, for cholera, for rheumatism, for paralysis, for female complaints, whatever those are. We actually don't have a medicine that cures that many problems, but nature contact comes close. Oops. So I'm going to show you a few slides, and it's cartoonish, but look beyond the cartoons, because each of the outcomes that I'm showing you here is backed up by a substantial body of evidence showing that nature contact delivers these health benefits. These are the mental and behavioral health benefits. Being around nature reduces people's stress, and stress in turn contributes to lots of other health problems. It reduces anxiety and depression. It reduces ADHD symptoms in children who suffer from that condition. It improves pro-social behavior and reduces aggression. Kids actually get better at conflict resolution and at playing with each other if they're in green schoolyards compared to if they're in non-green schoolyards. Now, for each of these pathways I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a little bit of a romp through evidence in the last year or two, just to give you a sense of the kind of evidence base that we rely on to make the claims you're hearing me make. If you're as much of a geek as I am, you're going to love hearing about some of this evidence. So here you've got pictures of recent scientific publications documenting that symptoms of burnout are reduced with contact with nature, that sales of depression medications are reduced. This is a pretty good indicator of reduced depression in places where there is easy contact with nature. That suicide rates go down in areas that are greener. That postpartum depression, this is something we're only just learning now, is lower in green neighborhoods compared to less green neighborhoods. And the one down the bottom left, I want to flag for you, for the lower levels of emotional stress during the pandemic. In fact, we have a pretty robust body of evidence now from the last 2 years indicating the power of parks and green space to blunt the toxic impacts of the pandemic on people's mental health. So that's mental and behavioral health, a large and growing body of evidence. Physical health, we have evidence that green space and parks deliver all of the benefits shown here: lower blood pressure, smoother post-op recovery. Now that doesn't refer to parks. Most people after surgery aren't walking around parks. But if you can see a park or a green space out the window of your recovery room in the hospital, you recover more quickly. Better birth outcomes, lower levels of preterm birth and low for birth rates. Improved pain control, less obesity, reduced diabetes, better eyesight. That may be a matter of better sunlight, better light when you go outside into natural settings, but it may actually have to do with nature contact itself. The only equivocation here has to do with asthma, because as anybody who suffers from allergies knows, sometimes vegetation can actually aggravate those allergies by creating pollen, but in many ways, green spaces improve asthma and allergies. So there's a mixed bag there, we have to be careful about how we deliver those benefits. This is a delayed action answer here. These are some recently published papers reinforcing and building on our knowledge that parks and green spaces deliver lower levels of cardiovascular disease, less preterm birth, lower levels of COVID mortality in greener neighborhoods, even when controlling for all the other risk factors for COVID mortality, lower diabetes mortality, and this is a brand new finding from just a few weeks ago, lower levels of premenstrual syndrome in women who suffer from that set of symptoms. So, boy, the more time goes on and the more evidence we generate, the more we appreciate the many medical benefits of parks and green space. And finally, overall health and well-being. Improved sleep, improved overall health in cancer patients, better general health. All of the benefits that you see here are associated with access to parks and green space. And here are some recent published results that improve our knowledge in this area. I might have to, do you have the ability to advance slides from back there? I think this little device is quitting on me now, so I'll just say next slide, please. Thank you very much. Here you see more outdoor free play in children, which we know is essential to normal childhood development. Greater subjective well-being. People just feel better. People have fewer somatic symptoms and actually feel happier with access to parks and green spaces. Now, a few observations on this body of evidence. One observation is that not all the evidence is equally strong. We have better established associations for some of these outcomes than others, but in every case, we have solid evidence, solid enough to be able to make these claims and to act on them. There are some inconsistencies in the research, and it's interesting to note that a common pattern of inconsistencies is this. A study will say, well, the greener the neighborhood you live in, the lower your rate of cardiovascular disease. The closer you are to a park, well, we're not sure we see the association. But the more you go to the park, the lower your level of cardiovascular disease. So the point to emphasize here
is that it's not only providing access to parks and green space, but getting people into those places that actually seeks to deliver the health benefits. And a third point to make about this evidence base is on the next slide, please. And that is that there is an equigenic effect from nature contact. And what does that mean? Well, this is a complicated slide. What I'm going to show you is the way that the benefits of nature contact operate across social classes. So in Britain, they actually classify everybody by social class, and they can do this kind of research. This is a study from Britain that was actually published 15 years ago this month, which was the last time I was at a Park Pride meeting. The baseline is the level of mortality of the wealthiest class of people in Britain. Next, please. The next line is either the blue bars, is the next wealthiest group of people. So these are upper class, not super wealthy, but upper class people. With the exception of the lowest level of green space on the left of the slide, you'll see that the greener the neighborhood, the lower the mortality. Next, please. The red bars show middle class people. And you see two things there. One is that middle class people die at higher rates than wealthy people. This is a universal observation and a tragedy in the public health field. But you also see that the greener the neighborhood, the lower the mortality rate for those middle class people. And what you see is that the disparity between the middle class and the wealthy shrinks as you get into greener and greener neighborhoods. Next, please. The dark blue bars are the poorest people. And you can see once again that their mortality is the highest of anybody's. And you can see that their mortality decreases the greener the neighborhoods they live in. And you can see that the disparity between the poorest and the best off people shrinks as you get into greener and greener neighborhoods. Now, you might draw two conclusions from this. One is that we need to wipe out poverty to help advance health equity, and that's certainly true. But the second conclusion is that as we work toward that goal, we can blunt the toxic effects of poverty through access to parks and green space, the so-called equigenic effect. And that's a really important benefit of the way parks deliver better health. Next, please. Now, why talk about all of this in the context of parks? Because parks are a setting for nature contact, and that happens either when people go to parks and immerse themselves in the nature, like these children looking at natural features, or these people on the bottom left doing what's called forest bathing, sitting there and mindfully soaking up the vibes of the forest. Next, please. Or people may just go to parks to be physically active, but they incidentally get lots of nature contact. And we have evidence that the same amount of exercise, the same amount of calories burned in a natural setting is better for you than burning those in a gym or in an indoor setting. And that leads to the second pathway through which parks and green space promote health, and that is physical activity. Next, please. Physical activity is really good for health. Now, what I could do is recite to you all of the health benefits that are shown on these slides. Adults on the left, kids on the right, reduced cardiovascular mortality, reduced risk of a number of our major cancers, like colon cancer, breast cancer, reduced risk of osteoporosis, reduced risk of depression, better childhood development. Physical activity is right up there with nature contact, and Bauer's electromagnetic breathing fluid has an amazingly wide-acting solution. The healing power of physical activity. Next, please. Why bring that up in the context of parks? Because parks are a primary venue for physical activity. And we have a large body of evidence. I invite you to look at the titles of those papers, pictured along the left side of the slide. What you see there is an evidence base about what it is that actually gets people to be physically active in parks. How best to harvest the power of parks as venues for physical activity. And I've listed some of those conclusions on the right. You need park access. People have to be able to get to the park. And that means transit routes to stop at the parks, and it means plenty of gates along the perimeter of the park. It means easy ways to walk into the park from the nearby neighborhoods. But even access doesn't do it by itself. People actually have to go there. And so for people to want to go there, they need to feel safe. They need to feel a sense of belonging. They need to feel welcome. And many of the techniques that I know Park Pride abides by, and we do too, of community control and ownership of the parks, are essential to achieve that goal. You need the right facilities. And what those facilities are will vary from place to place, community to community. One place it might be a soccer field, another place a baseball field, In another place, picnic grounds. So the community has to have a lot to say about what the right facilities are. We need the right amenities. Restrooms are really helpful. And shade is really helpful, especially in warming weather. So vegetation and shade structures help a lot. Those help people go to parks. And I think it's the very top paper picture there. It's one of those Dove papers showing that the more shade you have in the park, the more physically active people are in the parks. So that matters a lot. Programming is key. If a park itself is the hardware, the laptop, the programming, these are sports programs for kids, these are yoga programs, these are pool water exercise for elders, this is gardening programs. These programs bring people into the parks, and that encourages the physical activity. With maintenance, as we all know. So all of these things matter to harvest the physical activity benefits of parks. And with that, I'll turn to the third pathway on the next slide, through which parks are good for health. But before I do that, I have to mention one more problem. First problem I offered you was health. The second problem I'm going to offer you is loneliness. We have a loneliness epidemic in this country. Next, please. This is some data from a recent poll by Cigna, the insurer, on the level of loneliness in the country. It's pretty incredible. 1 out of 2 people, about half of the population, you can see the upper left there. You see all this? Is the focus okay for you all? Good. 1 out of 2 people often feel alone or left out. I won't read all of these statistics to you, but the level of social connectedness in the country is far too low. And far too many people suffer from feeling alone. Next, please. And loneliness is bad for health. That's why I'm talking about loneliness in the context of talking about health. The light blue there indicates people who are not lonely, and the dark blue indicates people who are lonely. And you can see a range of health impacts there. And for everyone, the health impact is 2 or even 3 times as common in lonely people as in not lonely people. So why mention this in the context of parks? Next, please. Because parks are a great place to make social connections. We have a big body of evidence showing that parks actually bring people together. And when people are brought together in parks, they reap the health benefits of social connectedness. Longer lives, less cardiovascular disease, elders who have good social connectedness and less frailty, they age more slowly, less risk of respiratory infections. Believe it or not, if you had strong social connections, you were less likely to get COVID and to get sick with COVID than if you were more lonely. Less dementia in elders and so on. Lots of benefits of being socially connected. Next. And parks are a great place for those social connections to happen. Lots of literature on this. I'd like to put the names of some of those studies that come out recently supporting that notion. And many of the predictors of whether parks deliver social connectedness are the same as the predictors of parks delivering physical activity. People have to be able to get there. Given that they're able to get there, they actually have to go there. Given that they go there, it's better if they stay for longer periods of time than shorter periods of time, because more of those social interactions happen. They have to have the right amenities, the right programming and maintenance, because those are the things that bring people into parks. Next, please. Next problem. Talk about health, I talk about loneliness, I talk about polarization. And these are kind of odd but interesting diagrams, at least if you're a geek like I am. The picture on the left shows 3 different time frames. You'll see a blue noun and a red noun. Those were 2 major political parties. Lots of overlap back 20, 30 years ago. And you see the blue and the red approaching from each other over time so that there's less and less overlap because we've become a more politically polarized country. The diagram on the right is one of these artificial intelligence high-tech analyses of retweets. So the blue retweets are who people in that group retweet things to, other blue people. The red are who people in the red group retweet to. What you see is that we've created echo chambers. We retweet to the people who think like we do, but there's very little crossover. This is just from last year. So this is the current state of polarization in the country. Next. We also have a problem with racism. Now, I am delighted, as I'm sure you are, that our country seems to be reckoning more and more with a long history of racism. But in the meantime, we still have a lot of divisions among us, racial and ethnic and other background features. Next, please.
Political, racial, social, economic, bedevil us as a country. Lots of headlines here from the public media talking about the depth of that problem, and it is a serious problem. Next, please. But parks and green space can help bring people together. This is one of the superpowers of parks. You have to feel a sense of welcome and belonging to be able to go to the park and feel like you belong there. You have to have a sense of engagement and inclusion. What really helps with that is community engagement in the design of the park and in the stewardship of the park. You have to have a sense of representation. So if you are, say, from an immigrant group, if you can see your own culture reflected in the artwork at the park or at a cultural festival at the park, you feel more welcome there, you feel yourself represented, and that makes the park a better place to go for you. Sense of ownership that comes with stewardship. And once in the park, the evidence shows that people mix it up with each other in very positive ways, and some of those social barriers begin to decline. Next, please. The next problem I want to talk about is unhappiness. This is the symptom that happens when you listen to a guy like me talk about the number of problems that I'm talking about. Next, please. This is kind of remarkable, and we're not all very aware of this, but levels of happiness in this country get measured every year with survey questions, the same questions year on year, so we can do comparisons. And the level of reported happiness in U.S. adults has been declining pretty steadily for some years now. There are bumps, goes up and down, but the overall trend is downward. Next, please. And sadly, the same is true for children. Children's happiness began to decline later than did adult happiness, but it is on the decline too. When I talk about happiness in the context of a meeting about parks and health, next please. Next please. Because parks help make people happier. People who get into parks like being there. And interestingly, you can see those published papers along the left, and you look at the titles there. What you'll see is that we have a brand new method of studying this phenomenon, which is scooping up tweets. You can actually gather the tweets that people send. This is retrievable. You can geolocate them in parks. And you can analyze the tweets using artificial intelligence to look at the emotions people experience and express while in parks. That's a part of the basis for being able to say people get happy when they go to parks. And by the way, happiness is good for health. Next, please. The last problem I want to mention is climate change. I don't have to belabor this point. We all know that the climate is changing with remarkable rapidity, and it's threatening us with a number of unhealthy outcomes. Bad air quality, the spread of infectious diseases, the direct effects of heat, natural disasters, and so on. Next, please. The parks help a lot with climate resilience. There's no better example than Cook Park here in Atlanta. I'm pleased to say that TPL was a part of this. This may look like a park, and it is a park, but this is also a piece of climate resilient infrastructure. Parks can play an amazingly positive role in this case, stormwater management to protect the nearby neighborhood from long-standing problems with flooding. Next, please. Sorry, I don't have an Atlanta picture for this one. This is New York. If you recognize the map of New York, you'll see Central Park there in the middle of Manhattan, and if you go due south, you'll see Prospect Park, Brooklyn. And what you'll notice is that there's a blue aura around those parks. That bluish aura refers to lower temperatures. The parks help with stormwater management, one of the challenges of climate change. They also help with heat. Parks can be 10-15 degrees cooler than the surrounding neighborhoods, and they are rested for people during times of severe weather. So parks offer us a great leg up when it comes to climate resilience. Next, please. So, to summarize all of those superpower benefits, parks and green space help not only by directly promoting health, mental and physical, but reducing loneliness, bringing people together, building social connectedness, making people happier, offering climate resilience. Next, please. And the kicker is that all of those lower bullets indirectly benefit health. So here's the superpower. Parks are directly good for health, and they're indirectly good for health through lots of important pathways. The last thing I want to talk about is how we delve into that big body of evidence whose pictures I showed you and take from it guidance on how to make parks deliver those health benefits as much as we possibly can. Next, please. I'm going to give you some action ideas. Some of these ideas involve thinking outside the box.
which this guy tells his cat and never to do. Next, please. So since we've concluded, at least I hope you concluded with me, that parks are good for health, that implies that health investments for parks make sense. Now, this is kind of a soapbox issue for me, but every nonprofit hospital and hospital system in the country is obligated by the Internal Revenue Service to do community health needs assessment on a regular basis and to make investments in community health. Now, traditionally, hospitals did that by providing uncompensated care. They discharged their obligation that way. But with the rise of Obamacare and the decline in the number of uncompensated people, that's the less obvious path for hospitals to take. It is entirely legal and possible for hospitals to do a community health needs assessment, to identify park deficits as a community health problem, and to put investments into that asset in communities. So, Michael, I think you need to be banging on the doors of the hospitals that ran for the Parks for All campaign and pointing out to them that this is a legitimate health investment. You can even go a step further. Another untapped source of health revenues that might help deliver parks and green spaces, thereby improve health, is Medicaid funding. States can apply to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services for a Medicaid waiver to get permission to spend Medicaid funds ordinarily spent on medical care for upstream determinants of health like parks and green space. Oregon has done that. Other states can do that. So thinking creatively about deploying healthcare dollars for parks and green space is an out-of-the-box idea, but one that I think flows naturally and logically from the fact that parks are good for health. Next, please. And if parks are good for health, that means that health programming in parks makes sense. Parks are a perfect venue for health programming. So there's yoga programs, the Walk with a Doc program, the Parks Prescription program, the elder-oriented program, programs for people with disabilities. Very important benefit that parks can offer. So putting that programming in parks is a real strategy that works. If you are here from a health department or a hospital, please think about doing that. If there is nobody here from a hospital or the health department, and all of the park advocates here might want to think about knocking on the doors of hospitals, getting into the C-suites and saying, why don't we bring some of the public health programming, the health activities into the parks? What a great venue for that work. Next, please. Parks work best as people go there. The evidence is very clear about it. So what we have to do is get people to go to parks. Now, I know this is baked into the DNA of park pride, and it's true for many of the sophisticated park advocacy organizations around the country. The important lesson here is that creating a park is only the beginning of the story. You can create a park, but you have to be sure that the people who need to go to the park feel welcome when they get there. You have to feel safe. And you have to put in place a programming that draws them into the park. So you need to do the hardware work, and you need to do the software work, and you need to put the funds into maintenance, because only when parks optimally perform in those ways do parks deliver the optimal health benefits. Next, please. Parks were invaluable during the COVID pandemic. I mentioned we have a lot of evidence about the role that parks played. That means that emergency preparedness, pandemic preparedness, equals park preparedness. So the emergency planning agencies in every jurisdiction ought to be thinking about being sure that park access is robust, and that when the next pandemic happens, and make no mistake, it's coming, people will be able to get to parks, and parks will be ready to accommodate people, because it's an amazingly valuable outlet for cabin fever and voice during pandemics. Next, parks are ecogenic. And the moral of that story, what I've written here is park equity equals health equity. But I didn't know the name of the new campaign until just this morning. Parks for all equals health for all. And that means that we need to identify through geospatial analysis where the park-deprived neighborhoods are and put parks there. And trust the public when we say everybody should live within a 10-minute walk of a park. Go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to show you that a number of jurisdictions around Georgia have signed on to the 10-minute walk to a park campaign that we run. And it means that once the parks are in place, and those parks, by the way, can be schoolyards that turn into green community schoolyards that do double duty as parks when school is not in session. And once those parks are in place, people need to feel welcome and safe going there. Next, please. Now, the last thing to mention is a cautionary note, which is parks can drive green gentrification. If you build a beautiful park, putting in green assets, the real estate values in the area can go up, and that can drive long-standing residents in the neighborhood out of the neighborhood. We don't have any magic bullet to solve that. It's a natural feature of the fact that we live in a market economy and real estate has value, and value will rise when places get better. But one of the strongest sets of strategies to reduce the risk of displacement is when you don't just do a park, but you embed the park in a broader strategy of community empowerment and community development. My favorite example is the 11th Street Bridge project in Washington, D.C., which some of you may know. This is a very aspirational project that will build a park on the remains of an old bridge across the Anacostia River, connecting the African-American neighborhood of Anacostia with the Capitol Hill neighborhood. It's been underway, fundraising, and doing design work, and so on for about 5 years, and not a single shovel full of dirt has been turned yet. But the Anacostia neighborhood is all in. The governance and management of this project is local. And what they have done in the last 5 years is local small business development, affordable housing development, vocational training for young people, and on, so that when the park actually gets built and they're about to break ground, it will be a park in a much more robust, prosperous, strong neighborhood. And that will help reduce the possibility of displacement of people who return. So these are some out-of-the-box action ideas that I think flow directly from the evidence we have on parks and health. Next, please. I want to summarize and substantiate my claim that parks are a public health superpower because they deliver all of the direct and indirect health benefits that you see shown here. And, next please, to maximize those health benefits, there is a series of strategies you might consider that help make parks attractive, make them feel safe for people, make them places where people want to go so that they get those benefits of nature, the benefits of physical activity, the benefits of social interaction in creative ways and in ways that will endure for everybody. Next, please. Thank you very much for your attention.
Questions. I will remind folks that questions have question marks, so please, I'd like to use our time here to have a couple of conversations, a chance to answer some questions from our audience. First off, Melanie Howard, please. Just introduce Melanie, but please introduce your name.
Yes, I'm Melanie Howard, I'm the executive director at Blue Hair Neighborhood. Thank you so much for a provocative and inspiring presentation. I was curious in terms of the research that you have conducted and studied and assessed. With, I think, a greater focus on inclusion and really widening the goal in terms of the issues of health. Have you found that your counterparts with your research over the past 2 to 5 years have also made an effort? Because I know that some of the studies are in Ottawa. Is that cool? We're studying the benefits and the challenges of parks. Is your counterparts making that effort to be inclusive, and to be really diverse in terms of the community that they serve?
So is the park research community making efforts toward inclusion? I think so in lots of ways. One is that we have a better ability than ever to measure the equity performance of parks. So using geospatial information, we can map where the parks are, where the people are, in each background to identify where the park deserts are, if you will. We can also track people's movements with cell phones now. This is kind of scary, but boy, the information that it delivers is phenomenal. So if you've got a big destination park, say a Piedmont Park, you can actually define who's going there and for what neighborhoods they come, because we know where the cell phones go to sleep at night, and how long they stay for. And then you can see whether the people who own those cell phones feel safe in the park. So we have a better ability to look into the equity performance of parks than we ever have. And all of that work is advancing very fast now. So I think, and what comes presented is the kinds of recommendations that I offered about putting parks where the communities in West Wheaton and Latham are, and programming in parks so that people who need to use them actually are going to use them. I'll just say one last thing. You heard earlier this morning that Atlanta's park score rating rose a lot. That was because Trust for Public Land, which issues park score every year, added a whole equity dimension to it that hadn't been there. So we were late to that game, but we did it. And the cities that had a more equitable distribution of parks saw a jump in their rankings. And that was part of the reason that Atlanta got a promotion. So I think that across the park sector, this is better and better recognized, and the data, I think, are helping with that.
Good morning. Atiba, serve on the board of Park Pride and Community Farmers Market. And you probably know that this park has a farmers market on Saturday. I just wondered, is there any research that shows the impact of parks that host farmers markets?
Was that farming?
Farmers markets.
Farm to market. Yeah, there is research on community gardens and on farm to market processes, and even on gardens in schoolyards. So I'll mention a few of the conclusions that I'm familiar with. One is that when children have access to gardens, when they help to grow their food, children's dietary preferences shift, and they go away from junk food and toward healthy fruits and vegetables. And that change in dietary preferences is long-lasting. It survives, we think, into adulthood, certainly into adolescence. So there's a real benefit for health, not only by providing healthy food, but by changing people's preferences. The other big conclusion about community gardens and the farm-to-market movement is that for the people who are engaged with it, social ties become very strong. We build skills, we build a sense of community, and then indirectly build health benefits, because being out in the gardens and doing the farming actually is really good for people, good for community as well. So I didn't go into the farming part of parks and green space, but it's a really promising movement. Thanks for the question.
Hello, my name is Pat Campbell, and I'm from the East Avenue Community. Annie Moore is our park person, that's what we call her. But I need to know how are you working to bring more underserved communities into the park spectrum? Because when she first started talking about parks, a lot of people were thinking, why do we need parks? And I've been so fortunate to be introduced to people who told me about trees. All I wanted to do with the trees was coming down because they were falling my house. So it's just, I think it's a lack of communication, or, that not connecting the dots for us. Because just this little while, I've just been in awe. So when you all start, during the plan, I hope you incorporate some type of way to make the parks more viable. I'm just thinking about the health aspect of the socializing and the safety. That was one of the things that I thought, the safety of the parks, prevents people as well. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Boy, I think one of the strongest levers for getting communities engaged with parks is when park advocacy groups like this one support local communities in engaging with their parks. And once communities organize around parks, the park acts as what some people call social infrastructure. It's not just physical infrastructure, but it becomes a focus for the community to come together, build a sense of identity, build relationships, and eventually build community empowerment. And lots of other good things flow from that. Not just the park and the physical activity, but all of the good things that flow from strong communities. One of the things to mention is that the Infrastructure Act and the IRA are making large amounts of money available to communities around the country. So one of the things that we all should be doing is building the capacity in small community groups to go after that money. That money's not going to be around forever. It's going to be around for a window of a couple of years. And community groups may not have the grant writing capacity and the ability to chase that money, but if larger groups like Park Pride or like TPL or others can help empower community groups to go after that funding, this is an opportunity to advance exactly what we just talked about.
And I'll just add on to that, that I think that I look at changes that need to happen both big and small. So I think one of the things that I'm most excited about with this Parks for All campaign and our efforts to make it so that communities that are looking to make changes in their neighborhoods are actually the ones that are raising their hand and determining the rate of change, and they're the ones at the table to make those things happen. And I also think there's big things that are happening with the Atlanta Beltline, seeking completion by 2030, that's connecting the whole city together. There's examples like Cook Park. So I look at it as not big or small, but big and small, that we really need to look at opportunities to meet communities where they're at and use these as opportunities, that we didn't get into this problem overnight. It's going to take some time of building that capacity and kind of being open to the idea that people connect these issues for different reasons and figuring out ways to make it meaningful to them. Let's see the questions right down in the front.
My name is Gus Hagarn, and I'm with Mimosa Hall and Gardens. One thing I've noticed is that the plastic industry has discovered parks as well, and so we're seeing a lot of artificial turf in places where we once had grass. I was be curious to know your thoughts about that change.
Artificial turf. I have to duck the question a little bit because I'm not an expert. Obviously, natural amenities are really good, so natural turf has a lot going for it. It's also the case that heavy foot traffic on turf can help destroy the turf, and so people prefer the plastic. But and there have been some health problems with plastic turf that I think are somewhat improved by the removal of toxins that used to go into them. But beyond that, I'm at the edge of my knowledge, so I have to plead ignorance.
Good morning. Robert with the Atlanta Beltline Partnership. Wonderful presentation. I wanted to get some feedback on the programming side of this. I mean, we, along with many other nonprofits, do programming in parks. We've got the City Park Just Free Fitness program. We find it really difficult because we don't want to be invasive with people in terms of like longitudinal studies. Does it, improve the health for that individual over time? It's really been a struggle. It's been trying to make the case. I know there's a kind of big picture stats and stuff that you put up there. So are you have any suggestions for nonprofits who are doing programming, how best to make the case to funders?
Boy, great question. I follow the community lead. If you actually have local community engagement in the programming, people will tell you what they want, and then it becomes easier to seduce them into coming into the park and doing the programming. And building health into the programming is really helpful. So getting health professionals to be part of your programming thinking, you might find yourself being drawn toward things like walk with a doc in the park, or the park prescriptions, and so on, that are really directly health promoting. I guess the last thought I'd share is think about the various categories of health risks that are in the community. So elders, people with disabilities, and so on. And think about programming targeted to those populations who really need health promotion in parks and benefit from it in particular ways and accommodate them. When Parks 4 comes out this year, which will be in May, the theme is health. So thank you, Park Pride, for giving us that great idea. We've done a survey of the top 100 cities in the country, and what we've learned is that more and more city park departments are actually doing that. They're kind of reaching out to populations who have particular health needs and doing programming for those subpopulations. That's nice because it provides needed health to populations who need it, and also because there are dedicated funding streams available in some cases.
So I want to, one comment that I've been wrapping around my head since we've been talking is the issue of activation and the idea that the infrastructure is one piece, but kind of the programming is that missing component. And I've been thinking about, I saw that Councilmember Jason Dozier is here from Community Development Human Services Committee, which he chairs, and Commissioner Justin Cutler. And I know we have an issue with our swimming pools. When we think about Atlanta becoming this very hot, sweltering location, and the importance of swimming pools as a place to not only recreate and exercise, but also to cool down, are a real important element. And that's one area that I think needs some special attention as we come out of the pandemic. And I was hoping the Commissioner could elaborate on that point. Commissioner?
I'll do that and actually have a question. But so first and foremost, how many people in your Parks and Recreation like work for a city or a municipality? So what I'm going to speak to is probably something you're all dealing with, right? How many of you are struggling to hire lifeguards? Most of you? Okay. So to get into this room, I would ask if you have a young person at home, ages 15 and up, please have them apply for a work permit. Please have them apply for a job as a lifeguard, because it's going to hamper our ability to open our public pools to the city of Atlanta and many municipalities across the state of Georgia and the Southeast. So please, if you have a young person at home looking for a job, this is a great youth employment opportunity. Many people who become lifeguards become future mayors, become future commissioners, become future park and recreation professionals. And it's something we too, so that many of you in this room can have people to take your place in the future. So please help us help you provide great swimming opportunities. And also, we also know that Black and Indigenous people of color die from drowning at a higher incident than other young people. So it's a social justice issue as well. So please help us help you stay safe this summer and swimming. In the city of Atlanta, the YMCA and Children's Hospital, we're also working on a coalition, the Water Safety Coalition, to identify ways in which we can get the message out around water safety and safety around water. Because we know when it gets hot, people want to be in the river, people want to be in the lake, people want to be in the pool, and we can do a better job as nonprofits in the city working together to promote water safety. So with that, thank you, Michael. And I do have a question. I know you're from Washington, Oregon, where you have a capitated model due to Medicare expansion. In the state of Georgia, we don't have Medicare expansion, and I'm still learning, what do you propose for a state that doesn't have Medicare expansion, which allows for certain things you spoke about in your presentation? What do you recommend for us in the state of Georgia?
Whether or not you've had Medicaid expansion in the state, you still can go after a waiver from CMS to use Medicaid funds in ways other than clinical care. So if you think that's a good idea, go for it. And I have to say, go for Medicaid expansion.
I think we'll end with that call to action. Please join me in thanking Dr. Howard.